Hey, Craig. Hi, Sarah. I love these conversations that you guys are having and the questions that you're asking. I feel like it's such a great conversation to have within our community. Our community is so rich and diverse, and the way people practice and communicate is so varied. So I think it's really valuable to ask questions and get people's feedback. And I think on one of the other videos, I had mentioned that when I was first starting out in practice, I felt like I would ask questions, and the answers that I would get were kind of like, "Oh, you'll figure it out," and that was true. And I think that I could have probably expedited that figuring out a lot faster if I had gotten more feedback from people who were already in practice and had good communication methods that were already working in their practice rather than having to reinvent the wheel. So I really appreciate you guys asking and being engaged in the process of learning. It's wonderful. So one of the questions was, how do you explain using a tonal approach to other healthcare professionals? And my hit on that is that sometimes we feel like we need to defend ourselves rather than to explain ourselves. And so if you're really talking to a colleague or another professional who is genuinely interested in your work, I honestly feel like the easiest thing to do is to say, you know what, let's just set up a time for you to come to my office. I would love for you to come like at the end of my day so you can see me working on a few people, and then I would love to get you on the table so you can have the experience of understanding what this work feels like, because I can talk about it a lot and I can explain it, but perhaps the best thing would be to just get you in a position where you can experience it, because it is so experiential. And we can talk about it, we can intellectualize it, and I can explain it to you from a scientific perspective. I can explain it to you from a practical perspective. But what I would most love for you to have that is that experience. So that would be one thing. I understand that that's not practical to do with everybody. So it's one idea. If it can work, it's great. The other thing I would say, I feel like the longer I've been in practice, the less explaining I do to people. Again, because I feel like that is trying to sort of defend what I do as being different from what other people do. And it just makes such perfect sense to me that what I do is different from what other people do, because that's the way my whole life is. I don't really do much like other people do. So nor would I in practice. So that question doesn't come up quite as often as I would think that it might. But I guess if somebody were to say, so tell me, why aren't you doing the traditional 2-minute chiropractic adjustment where you're crunching one side and crunching the other side? And what I generally say to people with my Hoberman sphere, which I'm sorry is still stuck in Pantelleria and I can't move because of the quarantine, is that when people come to my office, they generally are in a state of contraction. They oftentimes are experiencing physical symptomatology that makes them uncomfortable in their own skin. And so there tends to be a compression and a squeezing, whether it's postural and they're protective of their heart, they've gone through an emotional trauma, or they've gone through a physical trauma and they're just in a rigid state of protection. It doesn't make sense to me to go in there and start crunching and moving stuff if the system isn't already open and able to receive my adjustment. Now, that is also what I explain to lay people in my office. And with my Hoberman sphere, I kind of smack it a couple times and say, I don't want to do this to your system. What I want to do is listen to your body so that I can facilitate its ease as much as possible. And so moving bones may or may not be the best way to create ease in your system. So let's just see where things are and where they go. And it's a very quick conversation in my practice. And I feel like most people, as soon as I say, if you're in a state of contraction, it's going to be harder for me to create ease and expansion if I start smacking you. And so what I really want to do is allow your system to open from the inside. We're going to use your breath. We're going to use all the tricks and tools that I know to help create ease in your system so that it can open on its own, rather than me telling your body what it needs to do or where a certain bone needs to be. And I feel like right there I'm establishing that their body is the way it is for a really good reason. And it is my job as a chiropractor to figure out what that reason is, and to honor that reason and not to try and overpower their body. So I feel like in that case, I might say the same thing to another practitioner as well, and just say my goal is to create ease in the system, and I use whatever type of contact is appropriate for the way this tension is being stored in that person's system. If I feel like an osseous adjustment is going to create the most ease, I absolutely will do that. If I feel like a series of soft, gentle touches is going to create more ease, I will do that. And each track has a different need to be seen and heard, and so I'm here to listen. And I feel like for lay people, that's something that they're really excited to hear. For professionals, there might be a little bit more of like, well, why aren't you doing it the way I was taught? Or how come, where is this coming from? Where are you getting this information? What do you mean you listen? But honestly, it's like the more comfortable you are with what you do, the less conversing there is, because it's like, oh, this is what I do. So I hope that creates a little bit of ease in conversation for you. And again, I really encourage other chiropractors to share their perspective on this, because it's a really good question. And if it's up for one person, it means it's up for lots of people. So share your wisdom. Thanks.